Missed you guys. This is Miss Hickman, and this is our very, very first digital lesson. Yay! So, I'm just going to start off by briefly going over the schedule that you guys should have all received by now. It's on the school website, and this is our distance learning schedule. So, as you know, COVID-19, school's closed right now, but that doesn't mean that the learning stops. So here's what you need to know about how to access this course until the district says otherwise. There we go. Okay, so our distance learning schedule for history, because I am not your math or your science teacher. If you look closely, it's aligned by periods. So think of this as you being in the halls, going through class to class. You're following your regular schedule. Only thing that's different is the times which you go to your classes. So if you were in my second period class, you should be watching this video from 9:30 to 9:55 a.m. Now, the way I have my class set up, you could watch it anytime, but it's best, honestly, that you follow the schedule because you have other classes to worry about and you do not want to get too caught up or too behind. So follow the schedule. That's what's best for you, and that's why it's here. Okay, so if you're in my second period, you should be watching this video on Tuesday or Thursday because there's two different lessons here between 10 and 10:25. So short story, whatever period you're in, please make sure on Tuesday and Thursday you're watching the video. If you want to knock out all of Thursday's work here on Tuesday, you can. That's up to you. But I don't think you should fall behind. Follow the schedule. Now, office hours. If you need help or if you just have questions, I'm going to be hosting office hours according to the schedule. So Monday, the very first day that we're back, you guys can expect to see me on Schoology conferences. I'm going to be giving Schoology conferences a try. Hopefully it works well, and if not, we'll switch back to Zoom. So Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. These are the times that I'll be on Schoology conferences. So you'll just join the conference that's already there. Okay? And it'll only be for that time period. But you can always reach out on Remind, and you can always reach out on Schoology if you have questions. So don't hesitate to ask. This is your tutoring time. So use it. Use it well. Okay, so let's get to the history. All right, guys, so let's get started. And what I want to start with is a review because you've done a couple of things. Before we left, we started talking about Europe in the early Middle Ages. And you also did week 1 and 2, you did work across all of the Middle Ages in Europe. So that means early, high, and late Middle Ages. You've done work for all of those different segments. So right now we're just going to go over what we have learned so far. I'm going to go full screen. I'm going to disappear though. So Europe in the early Middle Ages, let's review. So remember, it's divided into 3 different time periods. Middle Ages. Today we are talking about the early Middle Ages. Historians usually round up, so when we're saying Middle Ages, we're talking about the year 500 to about 1500. There are 3 different time periods because historians looked at what was going on during each time period and they said, okay, there's some major changes. So the early Middle Ages is a time of disorder, disunity, and despair. Not a happy time. We don't really call it the Dark Ages anymore, but just know that they called it that because in Europe, things weren't going so well. Not a whole lot of time for innovation when you're running for your life. And we'll talk about why in a second. The High Middle Ages. So this is where we start to see the rise of the crown. That means there's a rise in a central organized government, a monarchy, a king in charge. That means somebody's running the show. Then we start to see commerce in cities. We start to see people coming back to city life rather than living in isolated areas like they had to do in the early Middle Ages because it wasn't safe in the cities. Now, the late Middle Ages, which we'll get to later, was a tough time for Europe. They had many disasters, including a church scandal involving the Catholic Church, 100 Years' War, and the Black Death, all of which we will discuss later on. So, what changed after the fall of Rome? When we're saying fall of Rome, remember, we're talking about the year 476, the early Middle Ages. After the fall of Rome, the people faced several problems. Those problems: disruption of trade. People moved out of the cities to rural areas. There's a lot of invasion there. So it was safer to move to isolated, rural, that word is tough. Rural, Miss Hickman still got it. Rural areas than it was to live in major, highly populated cities. You wanted to get out of there because, again, it was not safe. The roads, the Roman roads that were built to maintain the large Roman Empire, those were not maintained anymore. And you face a lot of danger by going outside to trade because people are just going to take what you have. There's not a whole lot of order. Rome has fallen. There's been invasion. There's a lot of chaos during this time. In other words, it was dangerous. Now, I won't play this video, but you can go ahead and play it on your own time, just in case you forgot. We knights of the bravest, crusades and plagues, it's dangerous. You go ahead and watch that on your own time. I enjoyed it very much. But that brings us to the rise of feudalism in Europe during the Middle Ages. Now, this is our lesson for Tuesday, April 14th. Hopefully you're not behind, but if you are, please don't make it a habit. We should remember what the feudal system is from our time in Japan when we studied the Japanese feudal system with the daimyos, the samurai. We're going to refresh our memories. Before we do that, you already know we have to go over our lesson objective for today. There are 2 parts to your lesson. This is just the first part. According to our distance learning schedule, you'll be in this class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can play this video at any time, replay it at any time. So just to make sure you're not falling behind on your schedule. After today's lesson, answer questions about the social structure of Europe in the early Middle Ages on Schoology. By Tuesday, end of day, you should see an assessment on Schoology. That will be what you're completing for the week. Just to recap, first step, you're going to watch this video, review the slides, watch and listen. The next thing you're going to do for this class is review. You're going to look over the questions that I'm asking you throughout this presentation, and you're going to make sure you have an understanding of them. And I'm going to be helping you by talking you through some of those concepts. Then the last thing you're going to do is take the assessment on Schoology. That will be the assignment for week 4. I recommend doing step 3 right here after you've completed part 2. This is just part 1. Because that way you can just finish it all at once and you don't have to worry about, okay, I kind of finished part 1. I got to go back and start the assignment and then go back. No, that's too much work. So do the assignment part after you finish part 2. So our essential question for today is anything in life, let's switch to the next slide. Is anything in life ever really free? So this is different from essential questions we've done in the past because this question is more of a real life question. My parents used to say the expression, there's no such thing as a free lunch, meaning, hey, even if you got something and it didn't cost you money, it always costs you something. Do you agree with that statement? You'll be able to answer that question by the end of this lesson. Okay, so think about that. Is anything in life, anything at all, ever actually free? You decide. Okay, so the medieval period begins with the fall of Rome, as we mentioned. The Western Roman Empire was the part of Europe that got invaded the most. Now, if you remember from class, we talked about the geographical reasons for that. It was a lot harder to get to the Eastern Roman Empire than it was to get to the West, especially because many of these invaders were Vikings. They knew how to sail, they knew how to raid, they knew how to trade. So Western Roman Empire falls. That's how the early Middle Ages start. Because it was not safe in the cities, People went to the countryside. People went where there were not a whole lot of people. It was safer there. So you start to see the rise of small kingdoms, not centralized. This will be a decentralized form of government, meaning it doesn't run through one person. It runs through a bunch of different people, kingdoms and states that are not united. Then we start to see the formation of a system so people can stay protected. Remember, not safe in the cities. It's not even enough just to move to the countryside. You need to have a system in place so you can be safe, which brings us to the feudal system in Europe, which is a little bit different from Japan, but it's still a system of protection nonetheless. Feudalism. Remember, a system of protection. You do need to know the definition of feudalism. A vassal is a person who swears loyalty to protect the land that they are given. Now, when you hear the word vassal, think loyal subject. So here's our feudal power pyramid. You see a lot of these social structures, but the important thing to remember is you might see different versions of this, but I want you to keep in mind the big picture. You might think, okay, the king should be at the top, but this was not really the case. Similar to in Japan, the emperor didn't technically have the political power. Here we see the Pope at the top. The Pope, who is the Pope? We'll learn more about him in a second. But we see that the Pope has more power than a king here. And then below we see the lords and nobles, the knights and vassals after that, the peasants and serfs below that. Something to keep in mind, kings are known as lords too because they come from a noble class. When we hear the word noble, I want you guys to think rich. They have money. You can be given the noble title by a political leader, like a king, or you can be born into a noble family. This group of people here, all known as lords, if you were to group them together. My lord, lords. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at each one of these roles individually in the feudal system. Remember, you have to give something and you have to get something. So let's take a look at each role and see what each person in the European feudal system got and what they gave. Full screen here. Bye. All right, so the Pope. The Pope is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. The main religion during this time is Christianity. The Pope is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. They were seen as God's representatives on earth. So that explains why they might have more power than a king, because they were chosen to represent God himself, according to the Christian religion. So kings, remember there's no centralized government. There's actually just small kingdoms. So when you have a leader of a kingdom, that is a king, but he's only a king amongst his small realm. They gave lands to the lords, and the lords, knights, and nobles swore loyalty to protect the king's land. They were all vassals to the king. So all of these people down here are loyal to their king, but the Pope holds more influence and power than the kings themselves that were all part of their small little kingdoms. Lords and nobles. Remember, kings can also be known as lords because they were members of a noble class, that high class. But the nobles swore loyalty to the king. In exchange, they were given fiefs. Fiefs is another word for land that they swore to protect. A special preview. This picture will show up again and we're going to find out who this person is and what they're doing. But this is a king. These are the nobles. They look like they're demanding something. We'll find out more about that later. For now, nobles given land in exchange for loyalty. They have to protect it. Now, how are they going to protect it? They're going to use knights, armored warriors that protected the land. The nobles are from a rich class. They're not going to go out there themselves and fight to protect the land. That's not their job. They hire somebody to do that. Just like the daimyo under Japan's feudal system hired samurai to go out and defend their land. The knights did the same thing. So they were offered land as well for their service. bound by a code called chivalry. Now, this is a code of conduct, kind of like at Fleming, we have rules where you can and can't do these things. Knights had the same thing. So they had a strict code of conduct that requires them to act in a courteous manner. Then that brings us to the peasants. Peasants and serfs. They were on the lowest part of our social ladder here. Now, the difference between a peasant and a serf, just so you know, if you had to choose, you'd probably want to be a peasant, because even though they were at the lowest social class and they all worked the land, growing and harvesting food for the entire kingdom, peasants were allowed to leave and come back, whereas serfs basically belonged to the land. Now, none of them were really free, because where are you going to go? There's a lot of invasions going on. It's not safe out there. But at least peasants had the option to leave and come back if they chose to. Serfs basically came with the property. They had no rights other than to harvest land for the purpose of the kingdom and take a little bit for themselves, very little. They received protection for their service. So the only thing that the peasants and serfs got for their time and for their energy and for their labor is protection. They also built the shelters where the knights and the nobles would live, but they got to live on land that was protected by the knights. Okay, so big ideas. Let's not miss this. The feudal system was necessary because it provided protection and stability during a dangerous time. We remember, a feudal system is only needed for protection. The Pope had even more power than kings. And look back on that slide and find out why that is. Why would a pope, a religious leader, have more power than a king? Go back to that part of the video and listen up and find out. The feudal system only works when everybody does their job. Everyone in the system has a job to do. Peasants, kings, nobles, serfs, everybody has a job. So if one part of that system doesn't do their job, the system falls apart. This is an example of a question that you will answer on Schoology. What did knights receive in exchange for their oaths of loyalty? Look back and find out if you can't remember. What did knights receive? Well, I'll give you a hint. Certainly wasn't a paycheck. A manor was a large estate owned by a... You tell me. Now, in some questions, you'll be expected to analyze a photo. In this one, you'll be asked, do you think this is an accurate depiction of the early Middle Ages? Take a close look. See what's happening. People out there, they all look busy. They all look pretty happy. Do you think that this is an accurate depiction? Yes or no? And then tell me why or why not in your answer. Take a look at this question that you'll answer on Schoology. Do you think this is more or less accurate? And then you're going to tell me based on what you learned about life in the early Middle Ages, yes or no? Why or why not? Is this what life might have looked like? You'll also answer these questions. First of all, I want to know, in your general opinion, do you think anything in life is ever really free? Have you ever gotten anything that didn't cost you anything at all? I'm just curious to see what you think about that. Then I want you to answer the question, was protection given for free under the European feudal system? And you're going to explain your answer with supporting examples. You can get that from the worksheets that you've completed. You can get that from this presentation. It's up to you, but you need to be able to explain your answer. Was protection given for free under this system? So, don't start this assignment yet, but week 4, there is an assessment posted on Schoology. You will probably need to refer to this presentation and your green textbook to complete the assessment. It's under the week 4 instruction folder on Schoology. So I'm going to show you very quickly what that looks like. Okay, so here I am on Schoology. Doesn't matter what period it is, it should look pretty much the same for everybody. The first thing I want to point out, if you haven't already, join Remind. That's the fastest way to ask me questions and get answers. You can click this link right here to join. And I'm going to go all the way down. Here's our week 1 and 2 work. Here's our week 3 work. That's week 3 of the school closure. And then we're going all the way down to week 4 here. We're in week 4 of school closures now. You see a note here saying when I'm going to post the work. And here is a note saying this is what you are expected to complete during the 4th week we are out of school. Okay, so we're going to click on that folder. Oh, and by the way, our weekly office hours, I'll have links posted to those office hours down here. If ever you need to talk to me or you need help and you want to video chat during our assigned office hours according to the schedule, you can go ahead and click this link. If it's Monday, click the link for Wednesday. There'll be more links posted. But let's go back to week 4. Hello. Okay, so more will be added to this folder here, including the video that I'm just finishing up right now. You'll see an assessment. You cannot take that assessment until after Thursday because I haven't posted Thursday's video yet. But after today, after watching this video, you can participate in the class discussion. And that's how I know you've completed Tuesday's video. Okay, so let's go over this discussion question. You are required to participate. This does count towards your grade. So the question here is anything in life ever truly free? Similar to what we discussed in that presentation. Have you ever received something without giving anything in return? Important point here is to explain your answer in 2 to 3 sentences. Some people have not been doing that, so please make sure you are doing that. These discussions count towards your grade, like I mentioned, and your response is posted. So it's not like you sending your journals to me where only I see it. It's just a discussion for our whole class. And you can also comment on what other people have written, but you are required to show respect. Of course, use helpful language, on task, answer the question, follow directions, and in your answer, I should see a winning attitude. But you can be honest with your response. Is there anything in life that you've received that's actually free? This is a real life question, not a history question, so feel free to answer appropriately. So I'm going to go back. Okay, so this is all I have so far, but Thursday more will be posted. So please be on the lookout for a Thursday video and a Thursday class discussion. When you complete all of those things, you will be ready for the week 4 assessment. If there's any questions, once again, you can hit me on Remind or come to Wednesday's office hours. Wednesday's office hours are when? Let's see. Wednesday's office hours. Okay, 2 to 3 p.m. That's when you can find me and we can get on a Zoom conference. I miss your face, guys. I really do. Hence, meme here. I hope you guys are doing well. Let's get started on that class discussion. Bye.